I finally got two of my favorite middle evolutions in figure form, and I gotta say, I was really glowing to these Jazzwares Pokemon figures when I reviewed them. I think the Ivysaur and the Charmeleon are both solid, but have some issues. Only thing is, as I was reviewing and collecting those, I became aware of some earlier Charmeleons and Ivysaurs. I never realized these guys existed until recently, but now I have all four in my collection, and I have to wonder who did it better. So, consider this the first ever version of a Ron to John, old versus new. Charmeleon and Ivysaur versus Charmeleon and Ivysaur. You heard me right. In what's going to be a first, I want to look at some older versions of some characters and compare them to their more modern updates. Try to figure out which company did it better, who had the best paint, best sculpting, best idea, best synergy between their figures, and kind of figure out from there which one do I need to go after a Wartortle for? Because I don't like Wartortle. I really don't. Wartortle I think looks bad as a Pokemon. But I would like to have all three middle evolutions. But I don't like Wartortle enough to buy the figure twice. So I'm going to look over both of these sets and kind of use them to determine which Wartortle I'm going to be buying. Let's start with the Charmeleons first. This is a 2015 Jakks Pacific Charmeleon. This is the 2022 Jazzwares Charmeleon. So, the thing I want to say right now is the reason we're starting with Charmeleon is because I think both of these figures have some bad problems. But there's also some good strengths to talk about. So, they're the most mixed bag out of this duo, on both sides. Looking back at the original Charmeleon, the 2015 one, he has a very weird pose. He looks like an old man who just hurt his hip. He does have some things you can do with the arms, like this, like literally just go up and down, but they don't look good, and the head is in just the right spot to where it can't really get overhead. You don't look like you're doing a cutting, unless like you did it like this, in which case it kind of looks like maybe he fell down, he's getting up, and he's about to like slash while he's moving. But otherwise, the pose is really weird, and if you try to stand him somewhere else, this is just going to become even more exacerbated, because now it looks like he broke his arm and is just going back into a fight. That said, the thing I love about this Charmeleon is the head sculpt. Look at how he always has like a sharp beak for a mouth and how angular it is. How angry the overall head sculpt is in the frame of the body. I also love the smaller flame that has a little bit more of a ragged detail with more of the yellow in the middle. So even though the figure is posed weird, there's a lot to like. Meanwhile, this Charmeleon is a lot more doughy. Like, you look at the head sculpts, look at the beak comparison. The beak here isn't even really a beak, it just looks like a tiny Charizard, and I don't really like that. You can also see the body is a lot wider, more plump, the limbs are smaller, the flame is bigger, and the tail is shorter. The thing is, right? The way I'm parsing this out, this is like the Kinsugamori artwork, where it's very angular, very manga-esque, looks a little bit more like animals. These guys are more like the designs that we've seen ever since X and Y, where they become a little bit more simplified, a little bit more, I don't want to say cutesy, but, just more streamlined. And that's a design that's happened a lot. There's been several major redesigns in Pokemon where all the Pokemon have gotten new, revamped looks, but the most pronounced one for me was when they jumped from the DS to the 3DS, when they jumped from sprite artwork to the 3D animation, because that's where you saw a lot of Pokemon lose a lot of their more harsh edge designs, if you get what I'm saying. Another thing I do want to point out is Charmeleon on the old figure has yellow claws, whereas the new one has white claws. Looking at the new one again though, his arms are somehow also useless. Like, you can't really get him doing anything unless he's like, what the hell, where's my car? Or like, I don't know, like he's gonna punch you. That's something. And also, the legs, they do articulate, but because of his body, you really only can get him standing straight up unless you want him falling over or using his tail as a tripod. Also, his tail doesn't articulate, even though there's a break. To be fair, this one does articulate, which means that you can get him into a few more poses using the tail. So, consider that like an advantage to the older Charmeleon. So, looking between these two, right? I gotta be honest. The old Charmeleon blows the new one out of the water for me. This one still has a lot of problems, but I also like how it's a little bit more kind of fierce looking. I like the sculpted detail better, and you do technically have more articulation. That said, I still think that's a solid Charmeleon. Looking at the Ivysaurs next, and this is where you can really see what I was talking about how there was a pretty major redesign between 2015 and 2020. Like, you look at these figures, and it's like, this is the more kind of angry, angular design that we're used to from the early days, and this is a little bit more in tune with the anime, a little bit cuter, also looks maybe just a bit too much like Bulbasaur. But let's get into this, right? Looking at the old Ivysaur, clear separation of the bulb from the leaves, you have Vine Whip going on, which is great, though you cannot make these guys articulate or retract, so if you don't like Vine Whip, that's always out. No articulation anywhere save for the head, which you can get side to side, but you can get a couple of different looks. You can get like a mischievous look, you can get a little bit more of a happy look, so that's fine. Also, colors very saturated. You have the wrong color eyes, though I do like the purple. I think that looks cool. And I kind of wish that the green was maybe a little bit more pronounced. But a thing I will point out is the proportions are better, not just for the old design, but the new design Ivysaur, because Ivysaur is supposed to have a longer body with some more slender limbs compared to Bulbasaur. This Ivysaur, that's just Bulbasaur's body again. And overall, this figure just looks like Bulbasaur with fangs, which is still fine. It's still a great looking figure, but even though I love it, and I honestly like how this one looks more than that one, it is less accurate. Also, you can see no Vine Whip, the bulb is now just attached directly to the back, and the bulb is bigger, but a little bit less painted, whereas on this one, you did have a little bit of a shadow going. So, this one's harder for me, because I like that one more. But when you consider the full package, right, where it's this guy, and this guy, or this guy, and this guy, these two just look more like what I'm going after. Here's where I'm going to once again stress that I love all four of these figures, and they are all some of my favorite Pokemon toys in my collection. But I'm just trying to make, a video talking about what the differences are, because a lot of time has passed. 8 years has passed, and a lot of changes have been made to the toy industry, and to Pokemon in general. When you look at these guys, the thing I keep coming back to is these are perfect Pokemon Sword, Pokemon Violet, Pokemon X and Y, Pokemon Sun and Moon, Ivysaur, and Charmeleon. The proportions fit better, they're more in line with the redesigns. But what I grew up with was the Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, and Gen 4 games. And in those games, Charmeleon and Ivysaur looked more like that. They did look more angular, they did look a little angrier, they did look a little bit more fierce, and had a little bit more of a strong line art design, as opposed to a more comfortable, kid-friendly design. So even though all four of these figures are great, I'm going to lean towards these guys, just because they more match what's in my mind's eye for Charmeleon and Ivysaur. But that's not to say they are objectively better figures. I think there's parts of them that are objectively better. I think that they're better painted. I think that they have better sculpting. I think for the most part they look better as a duo, but at the same time, these guys are cheaper, they're more available, and overall, they might fit a collection better, especially if you're just doing modern toys. These guys are definitely going to fit in better. It's a mixed bag, and you're just going to have to decide where your priorities are. Me, personally, I'm lucky because I get to have all four, and even though I think all four are great, and all four of them might wind up on my top 10 Pokemon figures of 2023, save for Ivysaur, he was in the last list last year, I still think I'm going to lean more towards those two. And that is going to be our first ever installment of Old vs. New. Let's see if I do this again. I might forget. Who knows?